Andre and Tracii, thank you both for taking the time to do this. Love the film. But the first question goes to Andre. Some of the interview subjects, it was a couple of hairstyles ago. So was this the kind of film that was in the works for 7 to 10 years?
In a sense, yes, because the underlying what really got me to do this documentary, where there was an existing documentary from like 2012, 2013, which is Randy Rhoads' The Quiet Riot Years, and they never really released it. And the filmmaker reached out to me, and I watched it, and I just thought this is incredible. So yeah, there's a lot of material utilized that's been dated from that period of time.
I call it comprehensive. And Tracii, great voiceover work in this film. Was that the first official known voiceover gig you did?
Yeah, I think officially I did have a coach with me to my left, so I can't take all the credit.
Well, you can take credit towards being early onto great bands, Tracii. And as a teenager, you got to see Motley Crue. In the heyday of all that, as a teenager, did you get to see Randy Rhoads live?
I didn't. And I didn't have an opportunity to. But, I found out about Randy Rhoads and Ozzy. I knew about him in Quiet Riot, but I never heard Quiet Riot. But I found out the day after he played the Forum with Ozzy. So that was the last time he played.
Got it. Andre, where does your fandom of Randy Rhoads go back to? Original Ozzy stuff, or even before that with Quiet Riot?
No, definitely the Ozzy stuff. I mean, I just remember Ozzy was like being a kid, just reading about Ozzy, listening to the early Ozzy albums. That was like the holy grail, man. So for me, that's where it all came in.
Yeah.
Without spoiling too much here, the film presents something that diehards know, which is Dana Strum played a big role in Randy Rhoads' life and career. Tracii, you've toured alongside Dana. Does Dana bring this up? Because I only really learned about this whole thing 2 to 3 years ago. I wasn't sure if this is like Gene Simmons style, like the third thing he mentions in conversation.
No, it really isn't. And, Dana is Gene-like in a lot of ways, very business-minded, likes money, the whole thing. But no, he doesn't run around talking about that he discovered Randy Rhoads. I'm sure he mentions it if somebody brings it up. But no, there's other people in this business that are above and beyond Gene. Even I know I invented the wheel, kind of people. But no, Dana never came across like that with me.
I've always had positive interview experiences with Gene, and I see the character in there. Like as a professional wrestling fan, I get that Gene is just a wrestling bad guy in real life. But the thing is, anytime you attack Gene's business savvy, he goes, "Well, I discovered Van Halen." I didn't know if that was the Dana Strum thing.
Right. No, he's never done it in front of me. So, I can only speak through my experience. But yes, Gene clearly discovered Van
Halen. Andre, you had a lot of obstacles in putting together a film like this. Among them, how do you tell the story of a person who's inspired decades of stuff in 90 to 100 minutes? How do you secure all the rights to this stuff? How do you condense everybody's opinion into a cohesive story-like way? Which of these things was the hardest thing for you in putting together the film?
I mean, quite frankly, all of them. I think that like I said, it was a unique situation that I had an underlying film that I was able to license a lot of footage from. But, a film producer, I've been producing films that are really hard to make and dealing with very difficult personalities. And I think that through my, 12, 13 years of producing movies, it really helped just hammer through it. So when there was a lot of times where there was a lot of people along the way that tried to squash it or made it really difficult for me. And I just, I just saw, we got to get the story out. And I'm not going to I'm not going to let this story go. There was a time where it was pretty sketchy, but I stayed committed and we got it done.
Tracii, back to you here. People listen to your interviews know that you're a historian for music. You're not going to call yourself that, but you can pick apart song structure. You know the names of the people in the band, the people who wrote the songs, etc.
Yeah.
That's why I'm calling you a historian type.
Right.
Seeing this film, I consider myself along those lines too, but I didn't know that Frankie Banali was nearly in Ozzy's band. Is there anything that you learned?
No, because I'm such a music historian, as you say. But it did it refreshed my memory. And the thing with Frankie is interesting because Frankie was the auditioning drummer. He was the drummer that was there to audition guitar players and whatever. But there were no auditions, so it was such a strange thing. And if you want to just backtrack a little bit, Frankie and Rudy came from Florida together up through New York, through the Midwest to LA together, way before any of this stuff happened, So if you really want to blow your mind, kind of go down that weird family tree of Frankie Banali with Rudy, ending up playing with Randy, and then Frankie being in Quiet Riot later, having the first #1 metal record with Rudy and no Randy. It's so wild. It's such a wild legend. That's truly what a legend is, right? That's the roadmap, right? And within the documentary, there are a lot of things like that people that aren't, sifting through microfiche and stuff like I do.
Right.
You're gonna, you find out a lot. You're gonna find out a lot of things you didn't know.
Well, something that's not in the documentaries. A week or so ago, I interviewed Bob Marlette, and the producer, co-writer. I didn't realize that he came up with Frankie and Rudy as well.
That's right. Bob Marlette.
And Bob Marlette co-wrote some songs for David Lee Roth, who factors into this documentary as well. So the Van Halen Quiet Riot tie-ins managed to happen decades later as well.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting because LA is 10 million people in Los Angeles County, but at the time, in 1977, let's say 1976, 1977, well, there might have been 2 successful rock bands and 30 almost successful and 100 not successful, right?
Right.
So it's not really much of a coincidence that you have a hot rod like Eddie Van Halen and one like Randy Rhoads. There's another guy, Greg Leon, that doesn't get mentioned enough. He was in there too, in the mix of those guys, and George Lynch to an extent, early on. But that was it, And if you're into rock documentaries and you hear Pete Townsend talk about the success of the Who, he always attributed it to, well, in the 60s, there was no competition. It's like there was this band, and that band, and that's it. And they tried not to copy each other, which to me is very similar to that disco era rock music from LA, because Quiet Riot and Van Halen are disco era, but they stuck to, they like hard rock.
Well,
Right.
this
They
question,
do a disco song though.
there's one Van Halen disco song, but we would rather not talk about that one. There's another thing of interest in this film from the Dana Strum section. I'm wondering if either you know the answer to it. It's that Ozzy had a list of guitarists that he was considering before Randy was given to him. Do we know the names of any of the people that were on that list?
I know George Lynch was on the list.
And George Lynch, we do see in the film, Andre. It's interesting that he's in the film, but we don't hear about his audition. I like that in a way you cut it off around like this is the end of Randy's life, rather than a lot of people would go and here's what happened a year after that. Did you know the ending of the film when you were putting it together?
No, not at all. I absolutely not. In fact, that was the most unknown piece from the point in which Randy joins Ozzy's band to, even the piece about with Dana Strum and the audition, was something that we had to put all together, and everything from that point on. I had no idea where to end it. And as a filmmaker, I think it just kind of organically happens. You don't know. I mean, unless maybe if you have a blueprint of exactly or a storyboard. I didn't start with that at all. It was very rock and roll. It was very chaotic putting this thing together, and I just kind of let the chips fall where they fall. But as far as the other thing, what Tracii was mentioning is I'm a California kid. I was born and raised here, very much in the music scene in a different era. And being able to make a documentary about somebody like Randy, who's from the LA area that influenced music all around the world, that meant a lot to me.
From the LA area that influenced music all over, like Tracii Guns.
Tracii Gunn, that's, and I have to say, a lot of people ask Tracii or myself, how did Tracii get involved? When I started the research process and looking back at a lot of footage and a lot of tribute stuff that has taken place over the years, Tracii always seemed to be there. And he always seemed to be very much involved in that legacy and carrying it on. And he also, in interviews, and I don't know if this is true today, lists Randy Rhoads is a big inspiration. And so it was unquestionably the best move to get him involved in narration, and he's a great guy.
Winding down here with those compliments said, Tracii, people listen to interviews with you know that in recent times you've done some cool collaboration albums through Frontiers Records. LA Guns had the great live record that recently came out, a new studio album, etc. What's next? What's coming up for you besides promoting the heck out of this documentary?
Well, we put out our last record in November, and now we're going to go tour for it in June. We're just completing the next LA Guns record now already. I'm completing a record with Todd Kearns, who plays bass for Slash, but he's an amazing singer. So we got that. That's underway. I just completed another Social Disorder record, which is the Swedish metal band from across the water behind me. Raising a 2-year-old, a 13-year-old, living in 2 countries, I find plenty of time to sit on the couch and play solitaire.
Which you always have. I mean, there's just so many idle years in your discography of not having a touring band or studio album. So,
right.
And then, Andre, in your case, yes, this is a movie that you worked on for a long time, and you've got your film company as well. Are you allowed to say what's next besides promoting this?
Well, one thing I'd really like to do is get an LA Guns documentary out there. That's something that I'm working on the side on. But I actually, one thing that I'm very excited about is I'm working on a Jim Morrison film called Burn Down the Night. That there was a book that was written by a gentleman named Craig Stretty. He wrote the Book of Poetry with Jim Morrison, and they were good friends. He wrote a book called Burn Down the Night, which is about a crazy night out with Jim right before he joined the Doors. It all takes place within a night in Los Angeles, kind of like a Fear and Loathing, but with this story. And we just finished the script and very committed to getting this, into production, probably in fall or winter.
Excited to see that. My wife is a diehard Doors fan. Thank you for that. And Tracii, since we have 1 minute left, for the book that I'm slowly writing on David Lee Roth, 2 quick questions. One, you've been in a lot of bands. Did you almost ever audition for Roth's band?
No, I didn't. I so many bands that I've been called to go work for, and Roth was not one of them.
And at what point did you stop becoming a diehard Roth fan, or are you still a diehard Roth fan?
Oh, I'll always be a diehard Roth fan. I love David Lee Roth. That was the first concert I ever went to. Did cocaine. It was what was it? It was Women and Children First tour. I went with my cousin Willie, who died of liver failure, of course. And, we did some rails in the car and went and saw Van Halen. And David Lee Roth was obviously, had something going through his veins, but that was, what, 1980, 1981?
Yeah.
Those were good times. That was a really good time.
Well, speaking of good times, congratulations on getting the movie done and out in such a wonderful way. I hope millions of people see it just as there's millions of Randy Rhoads fans. So looking forward to both of your future projects.
Thanks
Right
very
on,
much
brother.
for having us.
Paltrocast.